Welcome and thank you for joining us for tonight's event with Mary Helen Fein, author of Stitching a Life. Tonight's program is brought to you by Save Ellis Island, the nonprofit partner of the National Park Service for the restoration and reuse of the historic hospital buildings on Ellis Island's south side. My name is Susan Meissner. I'm the author of A Fall of Marigolds, a work of historical fiction whose primary setting is the hospital buildings on Ellis Island's south side. Tonight, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mary Helen Fein. Mary Helen began writing at the age of 12 when her mother died. Writing ever since has been an important part of her life as a way to understand and process life's events. Stitching a Life, an immigration story, is a historical novel, but it's based on the life of her grandmother, Helen Breakstone Fein. Helen came all alone through Ellis Island to New York City's Lower East Side as a young girl in the year 1900. Gradually, she worked to bring her entire family to New York. Jews everywhere were flocking to the New World at that time to escape the virulent anti-Semitism of Europe and Russia. Helen worked hard and long in the garment industry. She married her true love and lived a long and productive life. Her story is the story of how immigrants labored to make the United States such a great place to live. We also want to thank She Writes Press, Mary Helen's publisher, for their donation of copies of this book. Autographed copies of Stitching a Life can be purchased on Save Ellis Island's website shop, and all proceeds from the book sales go to the restoration and preservation of the island's south side. If you have questions while Mary Helen and I are speaking, just type them in the chat, and we'll be answering those questions at the end of our time together. So Helen, welcome to the Save Ellis Island author events. It's really nice to meet you and talk with you tonight.
You too. It's great. Thank you.
Good. So we were just talking before we went live that we're having this conversation tonight on the eve of a really important Jewish holiday. Rosh Hashanah, I believe, begins tomorrow. And for those of us who don't celebrate that holiday, I think it'd be great if you just told us a little bit about what that holiday is about.
Sure, because one of my closest relatives couldn't come tonight because she's a more conservative Jew than I am, and the family was in general. But she is celebrating with a big family dinner with grandchildren and everything. So it's the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. And we have what we call the Jewish high holy days that come at this time of the year. And they're beautiful, pretty happy holidays. Well, the New Year's is the really happy one, and the other holiday is more of a day of atonement. So we kind of start the new year with those.
No, that's great. Thank you for doing that. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
So the first question I want to ask you about this book is when people ask you what the book is about, what do you tell them? I know it's about your grandmother, but like, how do you expand on when they ask what the story is about? What do you say?
Well, I do always say it's about my grandmother. Because that's the basic answer. But I talk about it's about it's an immigration story. That's the subtitle, and it's about so many people have this story in their family history. People who live in the United States, we all immigrated here, and so I hear that so often from people. My grandmother came over at the same time or from a different country, but there was this great movement to come to come to the United States, and so many came by boat in those days. They couldn't fly, and they came through Ellis Island, and many people lived on the Lower East Side, which one writer called Plymouth Rock for the immigrants, which I thought was a great analogy.
Yeah. So how did you know you wanted to write your grandmother's story? Was it something that was percolating long, like for many years, or did you suddenly come across a memoir? How did you know this was the time to write her story?
It just came to me. This is what I'm going to do now. It's my second book. I had written a memoir of a certain time in my life, and I wanted to kind of I wanted to look at a whole life also, because the first book I wrote was just, took place over the course of a year or two. But I thought it would be really wonderful to look at a whole life. And my grandmother was such an important person in my own life. I mean,
Yeah.
my parents were both wonderful, but they got divorced by the time I was 4, and I would be with one and I would be with the other. And the one constant in my life was Nana. That's what I called her.
I love
And
that.
yeah, and she just saved me. So I wanted to make a tribute to her.
So you were able to grow up with her near you? Like, were you in do you live in the same proximity that you were able to see her often?
Well, my dad didn't remarry for until I was 12 years old. So he went back and lived with his mother for 8, 9 years. And I spent half the year with my mom in California and half the year with my dad at Nana's house.
Nice.
With my other mother.
Yeah. Yeah, no wonder. That's a very special relationship to have with your
Yeah.
grandmother. And I
Yeah.
love the title, Stitching a Life. It's a beautiful cover, beautiful title. Tell us how you landed on that title. What does it mean to you? What do you think that title communicates?
Well, it was a life story, and I love the subtitle, An Immigration Story. But the stitchery part, there's so many scenes in the book where there's something sewing. There's a wedding dress there, which they copy from the New York Times wedding dress of, I forget who, Eleanor Roosevelt or somebody wonderful. And there's there's making tablecloths when her family's coming over, and napkins, and all kinds of stories of sewing things.
Mhm.
And the publisher, She Writes Press, designed the cover, and they put stitches, they put stitchery as the borders. At the top is a
Oh my
Lithuanian
goodness.
stitchery pattern,
Yes.
which I just really liked a lot. So
Yeah, I just noticed that for the first time that it's
yeah, isn't that great?
yes, that is wonderful. Let me see if I can hold it up so that people can see that. So this is what she's
Yeah,
talking about,
great.
the
Yeah, yeah,
stitching. That's terrific. You may
yeah.
not know the answer to this question, and that's fine. I didn't tell you that I was going to ask it, but do you know why so many immigrants from Europe went into the garment industry? Like, was there a reason why so many went into that particular industry?
Well, I think it was partly circumstance, because my grandfather was known as a New World tailor. He'd never done any tailoring in his life, but all of a sudden that was a job he could get, and he got good at it. So, but I think because the ships, people came by ships from Europe, they came into New York, they came through Ellis Island, and they lived on the Lower East Side because it was the cheapest place. And it wasn't just Jewish people, it was all kinds of different
Right.
ethnicities, and New York was becoming the garment center of America. So there were lots and lots of jobs, and that's the main reason. It
Okay.
was supply and demand.
The
Yeah,
jobs were there. Yeah, and they could do
we're
them. Right.
there, and you could learn.
Right.
My mother was a good. She had the nicest little hand stitchery in her
Mhm.
little town in Lithuania, but she learned how to use that machine. So
Right. Now, before I ask you to read an excerpt from the book, which we'll do that next, but I wonder if you could tell us your grandmother has passed already. Is that correct?
yeah, yes.
So, when you were writing the book, how did you recapture like her voice in your head and how she might have explained or talked about what it was like as a little girl? Did you remember everything, or
I
did you?
remembered so much. I
Yeah,
really
really.
did. I can hear her voice. She had a very special sense of things. She had a very special sense of humor, and I just felt so loved by her. And
Okay.
so I can hear that and feel that, and it's just made my life more wonderful for
Great. Well, that means that it was easier to recall what it
yeah,
was like to have her around you when you were writing, having memories as golden as those. Yeah,
yeah.
that's terrific. Okay, so I would like you to read a little bit from the book if you don't mind. I think it would be great to hear
I'd
from you.
love to read a little bit, and the section is really, if you're going to ask me what my favorite section is, this is it. And it's my grandmother came from Lithuania. She's She's, 18 years old, and she's on this boat by herself. She's going to meet her father. He came first. And they enter New York Harbor. So that's where we are. And there's the Statue of Liberty. Everyone was transfixed with watching the great lady who faced them from hundreds of feet above the water. She had only been in the harbor for 10 years. While the statue was expected to age to a beautiful blue-green color of weathered copper, that process could take 30 years or more. Today, her original copper still gleamed. Hinda had read all about this lady and knew her history. Her full name was Liberty Enlightening the World. But nothing had prepared Hinda for the actual sight. The flowing grace of her robes, the nobility of her proud head, and the one arm raised high. The statue was a recent gift from the people of France. People all over France had donated to help create the gift. It was given to welcome everyone who came to the New World. A similar fundraising project in America had raised the money to build the pedestal, with most donations being from working people in amounts less than $1. The lady faced out to sea so that she greeted everyone who arrived. With her arm reaching towards the sky, she raised the torch of freedom, of democracy. Lady Liberty conveyed her welcome to everyone who came into the harbor, Hinda included. Her welcome was as warm to those in steerage as it was to those in first class. Hinda felt tears in her eyes. She clutched her friend's hand, and as they exchanged glances, she saw that her friend was crying too. Soon everyone around them was either crying, more and more sounds of joy predominated. Whole families joined in song. Everyone was hugging and kissing. It was as if a spontaneous celebration had broken out. No more czars or kings in America. From now on, the people would know best what the people wanted and needed. Hinda bent backwards to get a better look at the statue. She was moved by the gently draping folds of the golden robe, the 7 star-like rays of the crown, and most of all, by the strong stance with the arm raising high with the torch, defying anyone to try and rule over her and the people of this new world. Liberty was big and she was powerful. Hinda knew she'd come to the right place. For some reason, she thought of Helen of Troy, another lady of another harbor long ago, whose beauty had launched 1,000 ships. In that moment, a new thought came to her. Her new name would be Helen. No more Hinda from Lithuania. She would now be Helen of New York. She would be strong and free and powerful. This was where she was meant to be.
That was terrific. Thank you so much. That was a perfect way to get us into the story, especially for those who've not yet read it and will be reading it. I'm wondering how you researched this book, since we're talking about, this is over 100 years ago. And I'm also wondering if you've been to Lithuania or if your grandmother told you what it was like. Did she ever talk about what the old country was like? And if she did not, then how did you get a hold in your mind of what it was like to live in Lithuania at the turn of the century?
I was pretty lucky. There's a rabbi named Jeff Marks, and he's a relative. My grandmother's maiden name was Breakstone. If you live in the New York area, you buy Breakstone cottage cheese, Breakstone milk. It's a popular brand because the Breakstone family lived in a little village outside Vilnius in Lithuania, and they had a dairy farm. And so when the first cousins came to New York, they started a dairy farm. That's what they knew. What'd you ask me?
How you researched something that happened 100 years ago? Yeah.
Right. Well, I love Wikipedia. I live on Wikipedia when I'm writing, but I did know a lot, and we did go to Lithuania. We were on a trip in Scandinavia, and we had some extra days, and I looked and I saw, boy, this ticket to Vilnius is $100. We're going. So we, on the spur of the moment, we kind of went and we found her village, Panamone, which was right outside, and there was the river, which I had already written, described as this, narrow, fast moving. Well, it was a huge, wide, slow moving river. So I got to fix everything, and there was the path where she must have walked along the river, and storks is the national bird of Lithuania, and there were trees in everyone's front yard with 6 foot high storks making 6 foot wide nests with baby storks. So many fabulous things. And Lithuania was really, really fun. Loved it.
I'm glad you got to go. That's terrific.
Yeah.
When she left, though, when the family left, things weren't so great, though, right? It was a hard time. Would you describe it as a rather difficult, oppressive time?
Yes, the Tsar was a pretty violent anti-Semite, and it spread through a lot of Russia at that time, especially with his influence. And the Jews were really discriminated against. They weren't allowed to live in the town. They had
Wow.
to, the dairy, the Breakstone Dairy was outside of the town because that's the only place they were allowed to live. And I have a scene where, she goes to buy a loaf of bread, and the anti-Semitism was growing. So she had gone to this little bakery her whole life, and now she's 12 years old, and she goes in there and they treat her bad because the anti-Semitism is being promoted by the government.
Wow. Okay. So I know that that was a theme you explored, is just what it's like to live in an oppressive environment. But what other themes did you explore? I know family is one of them, devotion to family, and breaking out, like exploring, taking big risks and exploring a new experience. But were there other themes that you think originated or kind of evolved out of the story that you told?
I think just the idea of, if you can imagine getting on a spaceship and going to live on Mars
Mm.
right now. I mean, that's God, what it had to be like to get on a boat and come to the new world. That's how I always think of it. It had to be so different from anything you had ever known. And just to kind of work with what that must have felt like.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really great way to describe it. I've never heard someone describe it that way, but I'm sure that's must have been what it was like.
Yeah.
And for most of them, wouldn't you say it was a one-way ticket? Like they probably knew they weren't going to come back. Is that true? You think they,
I think that's so true. They
yeah.
were never going to be able to go back. Plus, if you didn't get out of Germany and Russia and that whole area in around 1900, by 1930, the
Oh,
30s,
yeah,
you would have been killed.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So, did the writing of this book change you, broaden your perspective? Did you learn new things by writing this book?
I did. I really did. One thing I learned is how much I love writing.
Mm.
I can just write all day, and then it's 4:30, and I want to go make dinner. But let me just write another half hour, and pretty soon it's 6 o'clock, and my husband's hungry. I love writing, and I really did learn that during this book, and I've written 2 more books since then. So
Oh,
I'm
that's good to hear. I want to hear more about those at the end,
okay.
what you're working on for sure. Um, I'm sure you had favorite parts to write, and I know you just read one to us that I think you told me was your favorite. But do you have other favorites that were like either just a joy to write? And then the inverse of that, I want to know if there were some really difficult scenes to write.
Yeah. I liked writing about the job that she went to. They had found her a job in a little shop that made knickerbockers, which were short pants, but the New Yorkers were the Knickerbockers, that's the sports team. And so that's what those short pants were called. And so she got a job there, and there were some very welcoming friends that she made, and it was really nice. And she made friends with a redheaded Irish girl, which was what for her? She'd never seen anything like that. But then at the same time, there was a very difficult girl at that job who and that's one of the themes of the book, that she actually befriends, by the very end of the book, she befriends this person and helps her. but she
Oh.
had lost her fiance and was very bitter and angry at everybody. And she was always reporting the girls for talking too much to the boss, and getting everybody in trouble. So that
And
was hard.
that part was hard.
That was hard, yeah.
What made it hard, do you think?
Well, here I was creating a character who was miserable,
Oh, right. So you
whereas
kind of have to enter into that pain to write about it, I
you,
guess. Yeah.
you do.
Yeah. Were there times where you felt like you were stuck, or did the writing come easily to you?
I don't remember getting stuck. It pretty much flowed.
That's terrific. You need to bottle that or write a book about that. How not to get stuck. I admit I have moments when I get stuck. I'm really glad that you did not. It's not the most fun thing.
Very
Um,
good.
so you did say you're writing more, and I'm sure the rest of us would love to hear what it is you're working on next, and where these other ideas came from. Did they also spring from your family?
Sure. My book that I wrote after this one is uh, is my own life story,
Hmm.
and it's called Moments of Knowing, and it's coming out in April, and it's it's all these moments in life when something kind of wakes you up and you see things in a new way and it contributes to your worldview. That are these moments of knowing. So, I go along and tell a story and then something happens and I say, and that was a moment of knowing.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun to write.
That's great. And it comes out next year, did you say?
Yeah, April 2025, it'll be out.
Good. So writing is what you're doing now. What did you do before? What career did you have that led you to this segue into being a writer?
Oh, well, computer programmer, you can
Yeah.
imagine that led right into it. I'm just, being silly. But I like games and puzzles. And as far as I was concerned, the minute I saw a computer, I was hooked. And that was, in the 80s sometime. And I went back to school, got a master's in computer science, and worked in the field for a lot of years. And then, like about 15 years, I worked in Fortune 500, and then I moved to California and started, because I also went to art school, started a web design business. And then I did that for another 20 years, and it was just so much fun. And then once I retired, that's when I really started. I always wrote, but once I retired, I could put a day into it. So
Was it like an itch that just had to be scratched, or was it like a new love that you discovered, or were you wanting to write all this time, it just didn't have the time?
no, it was just the right time for it to start. It was just the right time.
Yeah. What books do you feel like influenced your writing?
Oh boy, there's so many authors I love so much. I love Ann Patchett.
Oh, I do too. She's one of my
And
favorites.
isn't she great? And her new book, really good. And then King Solver, isn't she great too? I
Yeah.
love these strong women writers. I also read too many mysteries. They're kind of like, jelly beans, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll have another mystery.
So has New York always been your home? I
I,
know you live in California now, but
yeah,
it was like in your growing up years, were you a New York girl?
yeah, I was. We lived in Riverdale. That's where my grandparents built their house, and my dad grew up, and I lived there until I was until my parents wanted to get me into a good schools, high school.
Mhm.
So we moved to Westchester County, where the schools were really good, and
Yeah.
and I went to college in Philadelphia, and
Hmm.
uh, and then met my husband and moved to California.
Yeah. So it was your father then who was the son of immigrants, is that correct?
That's right.
Now, was your grandmother's husband, was that person also an immigrant, or did she meet somebody who'd been here in the States for a while?
No, he was also an immigrant, but he was from Germany, and he had come earlier.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know my grandfather. He
Oh,
died
okay.
before I was born, but so I kind of had to make him up somewhat. But he was
Yeah.
here Germany, and he also was an immigrant.
Okay. Did your father ever share with you what it was like to be a child of immigrant parents? Was that different for him?
I think it was important for him. I think he never took anything for granted about this country. He loved this country, and when he finally moved to California, he was in heaven, and he could see it was pretty close to the Pacific Ocean, and when he died, he wanted his ashes put into the Pacific Ocean because that's what,
Yeah, well, that's sweet.
yeah.
So if your grandmother were alive today, how would she, like, what do you think she would think about your book? Like, would she be like just touched, or would she be amazed that you did it? Or what do you think her reaction would be?
I think all of the above.
Yeah.
I was a little kid, this little kid's writing a book about me, but I think she would feel honored because, I just hold her in such high regard, and I hope that comes through. And and my cousins, and she's their grandmother too, and they were all so kind about it. I know their memories are a little different from mine or their feelings about her. We all adored her. We all thought she was just so smart and so funny and so great to us all.
Hmm. And did she live a long life, or has she been gone a long time?
She was up in her 80s,
Yeah.
so she lived a long life
Did she stay pretty much in the
in the
same
neighborhood,
area of
same neighborhood,
Manhattan the whole time?
Riverdale, which is in the Bronx, but
Oh, okay.
they built a house in the country, right? So that was, and then it became, they built a big house in the country, which by the time I came along was a small house in the Bronx.
Did she um did she ever compare her New York life with her Lithuanian life, or did she just make a kind of a when she changed her name, did she kind of just leave all that behind? Did she ever talk to you about what it was like where she used to
Yeah,
live?
I mentioned that earlier, and I dropped the ball because I wanted to say she never talked about it.
She never did.
I did not know she was from Lithuania.
Really?
I knew she was from Eastern Europe, but I had to co-discover everything myself. And visiting that village was just the greatest thing to see the reality of where she grew up.
Wow. So
Yeah.
she never sang songs in Lithuanian or spoke in Lithuanian or anything like that?
She and her sister Selma, who's a 12-year-old character in the
Yeah.
book, um, when I was a little girl, they would speak. I think they were not speaking with. I think they were speaking Yiddish, and so I would say, "Please don't talk Chinese."
Uh, that's pretty funny. Do you ever wonder why she's never felt like sharing about that part of her life?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention it. I think she was so happy in this country that she really didn't have occasion to go back. It's probably a lot of hard things there with the
Yeah,
anti-Semitism growing all the time. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna tell people if you want to start asking your questions, just drop them in the chat, and I'll read them off to you, Mary Helen, so that you don't have to worry about paying attention to the chat window. And meanwhile, you and I will just keep chatting, but feel free, people, to put your questions in the chat, and I'm sure we'll have the time to get to all of them. So when you went to Lithuania and you're able to get to the village, did you have a guide? Did you have anybody helping you with the language barrier? How did you find that trip to be meaningful without being able to understand the language?
There's an organization called Tours by Locals, and everywhere you go, there's usually a tours by locals that you, and so when we travel, we often get in touch with Tours by Locals. And
That's
so
really
here you
smart.
get somebody who like grew up in Oregon and then has lived in Vilnius in Lithuania for 25 years. And so he's totally fluent in English. He knows right where we're coming from, and yet he knows everything about the place where you are. And so this wonderful guy from Tours by Local took us out to the village, and he did all the communicating with the villagers and, helped us and just kind of get the feel. I
That's
recommend the
amazing.
organization. Really
And
good.
it's called Tours by Locals, did you say?
Yeah, toursbylocal.com. I'm pretty sure you can find it.
wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
How would you compare Lithuania to perhaps other countries that like I've never been anywhere in that part of the world, but I've been to Germany and I've been to France and the
Mhm.
Netherlands. How does Lithuania compare to like one of those countries?
Well, the cities are smaller and less, thrilling. Only this is not Paris. But, they had some nice restaurants and we stayed in a nice hotel, but there weren't lots to choose from, but it was good. And then the village, it was very rural. The minute you got out of the big city, everything was very rural. And we did take the train. And you just went miles and miles of rural houses and fields and it was,
Wow.
yeah.
So, I'm wondering how, maybe you don't know this, but I'm wondering how it is different now that the USSR is no longer an entity. D- Did you sense that people feel a sense of freedom and independence, or is it just something that you could only really know if you lived there under both regimes? What do you
Yeah, I don't know what it was
feel?
like before, but people there seem very proud to be Lithuanian.
Mhm.
I got a nice feel for that. And Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Baltic states,
Right.
and they're kind of lined up north to south, and um, it was a very interesting area.
Yeah.
Yeah, but very rural.
I
Not,
wonder how many Lithuanians immigrated during the Great Immigration Wave. Do you have any idea on how many left?
I think mostly the Jewish people
Right.
left because everybody else was okay.
And you had to have a sponsor, is that correct?
I never came across that.
Really?
I never came across that. I
Mhm.
don't know.
Okay.
I don't think they had anybody. I don't think our family had anybody here, but I know I
Mhm.
didn't come across that. I know that there were some very strong reasons to leave Lithuania or leave Russia. There were 12-year-old boys were drafted into the army for 25 years. They wouldn't get out till they were 30 something. And
When I read that in your book, that just made my jaw drop open. So that really happened.
that really happened, and and I researched that a lot on Wikipedia, made sure it was really true, and it was. And they would come
12-year-old
back.
boys.
Yeah.
And I guess they could not marry then while they were being conscripted. Like they were just,
No, they were off to war or whatever. Yeah,
yes.
horrible.
Wow. And was that required of Latvian little boys too and
I
Estonian
don't
boys?
know. I don't know about Latvia and Lithuania.
Okay.
Probably they were Russia too, I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm sure it
Wow.
was a policy. Yeah, maybe not with the Russians themselves, but for
Right.
these little
Gosh,
states.
that's amazing.
Mm.
So we have a comment here from Diane. She says, my grandfather came from Norway as a 15-year-old in 1900, same year. Came through
Wow.
Ellis Island. Yeah. Married an American Norwegian. They were so focused on building a life on the North Dakota prairie. At that
Mm.
time, it seems once you came to America, you assimilated, learned English, and supported the culture. He went back to Norway for a visit in 1946 after the war. Oh, that's nice. Thank you for sharing that. So I guess some people do get to go back, but that's 46 years later. That's amazing. I got the feeling when I researched my own book that a great many people did not think they would ever be able to go back, and so saying goodbye to the mother country was almost like saying goodbye forever.
It
Like you,
was. I
uh,
think it really was. I agree. Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to mention is that when people I meet people who've read the book, and so many people say to me, "I have the same story. My
uh,
grandmother came, or my grandfather came and left everything behind and came to New York or went to Texas or wherever it was and had to start a new life and they went through such similar experiences." I hear that so much.
hmm,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, so that made me feel good.
Yeah. You've probably been to Ellis Island, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. And what did you come away with having and I think we all have our we all walk away from that place
Oh, yeah.
with deep feelings, and so I'm wondering, what did you come away with your time on the island, however many times you've been able to go?
I came to New York and I went one day to the Tenement Museum,
Mm.
which I could see where she lived. It would be
Yeah.
the exact apartments because the whole Lower East Side is these five-story brick buildings and the apartments are all the same and they had them there and you could see just how people lived and they had, an apartment marked 1900 Jewish family or 1875 German family, so you knew you could find your probably very much like, and also then I went to Ellis Island another day and spent the whole day. And oh God, you walk into this huge, everything is tile, red tile, and it's just a huge, huge room, and there's so much going on. It's busy, and then you go up these steps. They had a name for them. I forget what it was, but it was bad because there was a guy there, and if he put an X on your coat, you were going back to Europe on the boat, And then you had to wait and wait and wait and see the doctors, and they would check your eyes and your ears and your fingernail. Not much, perfunctory, but they were very worried. They checked everyone's eyes for redness. They were very scared of people bringing disease into the country, but it was quite an amazing experience to imagine, if that you could get put back on the same boat you just came on that day and sent back to Europe. And your kids would stay in America. I mean, they didn't respect the family boundaries necessarily. So the mother might not make it and everybody else in the family would make it. And so there's
So
that.
tough. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing, really.
If you were sick at all, well, about the hospital.
Yes, yes. I think it was amazing, really, that if you did go up those steps and you did get a chalk mark, or
Yeah.
you didn't pass your medical inspection, that they did try to make you well. That you were taken, to the other side of the island where they had this amazing set of hospital buildings. When I first went to Ellis Island, I was amazed that the immigration building is wonderful. It's beautiful. It's been restored beautifully. And then all the other buildings, many multiple buildings that made up the hospital complex. And this is where you went if you didn't pass your medical inspection.
Oh, gosh.
And they tried to help you out and make you well. And so it
Oh,
was
wonderful.
it
And
wasn't
that's
the
where
end of the
you're,
road necessarily. I think if you had tuberculosis, there was no there
yeah.
you'd be sent back. But for other people who had other
Mhm.
communicable diseases, they tried to make you well, which is pretty amazing. That
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing public hospital, the best of its kind, and it was new.
It's
It was new at the
great.
turn of the century. Yeah, so it's pretty
Speaks
pretty
so
cool.
well of our country. And that's where
Yeah,
your book is set, right? In the
yeah,
hospital?
in the
That's
hospital
great.
buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read that book.
Yeah, thanks. So Doug asks, was there a strong Lithuanian community in New York during your grandmother's time?
I don't know.
Really? She didn't talk about having other Lithuanian neighbors,
No,
huh?
I know there was a very strong Jewish community
Hmm.
and and then bonding among immigrants of all kinds. And,
Right.
you know, but she didn't
Yeah.
talk about Lithuania. I think she
I wonder
wanted,
if they were there, but she just didn't make a big deal of it. And so
yeah,
you might have seen her talking with friends, and it didn't occur to you that they might have had something in
right,
common like
right,
that.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Did she stay in the garment industry the whole time?
Uh, I guess they probably saved enough money, she and her husband, to buy this land up in Riverdale, which is, the northernmost part of New York City. So it's a long, long ways.
Mute, yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I think then, and she had 8 kids, so she did not work.
Yeah. Yeah. She had a job.
Yeah, I think my grandfather did pretty well because they built a very pretty little brick house in Riverdale on a tree-lined street. And they had two lots. They had a big greenery lot with hedges around it that you could
Mhm.
sit in, and we all did, and birthday parties and things. So
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that is great. That
yeah.
is great. So what do you think is the value? And I know there's a great answer for this, but I want to hear your answer. What do you think is the value of immigration stories?
Mm. Well, isn't it great to have the big picture, a
Mhm.
bigger picture? Because we get so lost in our daily lives and running around and doing our errands, and we don't think about anything, not even our own big life story, but our ancestry and our, the generations that we belong to. I think it's
Mhm.
so wonderful to stretch your mind a little bit and hold
Mhm.
that picture and feel your roots and understand where you came from and how it affects you,
Yeah. Yeah,
makes you feel more.
I totally agree with you. I do. Do you have any advice for someone who might be listening either right now or who will listen to it later? Advice for someone who wants to write their family story. What particular challenges will they face? And what kind of help could you give them about even just starting the process?
Yeah, I didn't worry too much about facts. I made it fiction so that, anything I didn't know, I was free to make up. And that gave me a way to kind of structure it, yet at the same time base it in fact. And that was very freeing, I think. And so that worked for me. Because otherwise, like tracing down facts can be, you can just live on Wikipedia for your whole life if you're not careful.
Yeah. 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 And is that how you address the biggest challenge? Is just finding everything, or are there other challenges too to writing your family story?
Oh, well, there were a lot of challenges, there were writing and organizational challenges and emotional challenges and just your heart in, heart open while you write and trying to, uh, be with the feelings and
Mhm.
everyone's feelings and let that
Mhm.
run the story the way it runs our lives.
Right. And did you encounter any kind of resistance at all from any members of the family?
No, no,
Yeah.
I was worried because, as I said, I have other first cousins and she was their grandmother too. And I
Right.
wasn't sure they would have seen her the same way I did, but they were all very generous about it. And I'm sure they had different, some different impressions.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the kind of the beauty of memoir or a story that's based on a real person is
Mm,
you're telling the story from the way you knew that person.
right,
And so and you're right, someone else in the family, their perspective might be different.
yeah,
Doesn't mean that one of you was right or wrong. It just means that you both experienced that person in your own, personal and individual way, which
right.
is which is kind of nice that it's that way.
It is, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as approaching the writing of the book, did you write, uh, did you set goals for yourself, or did you just, however much you wrote in a day was fine, or did you feel like, no, I need
Yeah.
to?
No, I was fine with however
Mhm.
much I wrote in a day, and most days I spent writing, although some days, I had appointments and stuff and I couldn't really do as much as I would have liked, but mostly I wrote, and it was just so enjoyable for me. I just
Did you
love it.
did you plot it? I know there were some things that you couldn't. Your grandmother's life was her life, but you did say you had to come up with some things on your own. Did you plot it, or did you just kind of just you wrote it as it came to you as you were writing?
I wrote it as it came to me as I was,
Yes,
yeah,
really.
yeah, yeah, I don't, yeah. I mean, I knew I had a life story, but I didn't really plan it out. I just, let's write the next page. Let's see what happens next. It's like, it's like living.
Yes, yes, that's funny. I have to have a little outline. It's not very comprehensive. I don't know how to feel confident if I don't know
Yeah,
where I'm headed. So I think I have lots of friends who write the way you write, though.
yeah,
They discover it as they write it, which is
yes,
probably its own thrill. Yeah, no,
I
that's
knew she had to meet my grandfather and that would
uh,
be big. And I knew, and I put them on the Staten Island Ferry for their first day because I love the Staten Island Ferry so much. And then I knew that, that their relationship had to develop and their relationships with each other's families, his mother, him
sure.
coming to dinner and everybody meet. I loved how I had this idea of her, my grandfather, it being introduced to the family because one of her brothers gets attacked and they're beating up the dirty Jew on a street in Manhattan, and he happens by, and he jumps in. He's Jewish too, and he jumps in and he saves her brother from these hoodlums, and then he kind of brings him home, and that's how the family meets him. So
Now,
that,
did you make that up or did that really happen?
no, I totally made it
Okay. I was gonna say, like,
up. Anything dramatic, I pretty much made up.
wow. So did you invent how they met or did you know how they met?
I had no idea how they met.
You had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was in the garment industry too, so I had the
Mhm.
through
Right.
work. So when he brought home her injured brother, they had already met, and she had
I
sort of
see.
admired him from afar. So
Sure.
yeah.
Well, like, what is it that you love about the Staten Island Ferry?
Oh, well, when I was a kid in New York, my parents, when I got to a certain age, I was allowed to go into Manhattan by myself with my girlfriend, and it was so exciting. We'd go to the village and we'd sit in the leather store for an hour and bother the people. And then we'd get on the Staten Island Ferry. It was 5 cents. And we'd ride it back and forth 10 times,
Oh
and see
my
the
goodness.
Statue of Liberty. And we'd run upstairs when it docked so they wouldn't find us and we could do it again.
That's great. That
Yeah,
sounds like a something should be in another book or something. That's
maybe.
yes. Yeah. This now is this your first work of fiction? Your other what you've written before was not fiction. Is that correct, or did I not have that right?
It was not fiction. It was a kind of an adventure story that I actually lived.
All
And so,
right. So
yeah,
this
and
was your first foray into fiction?
it really
Yes.
was. It really
Yeah.
was. I didn't even think of it that way. And
Yeah.
then now I'm wanting, and then I wrote my, memoir autobiography, and then I've just written as told to me by my meditation teacher,
Wow.
a well-known Buddhist teacher. So that's my fourth book, and that's
Wow.
shopping for a publisher right now. If anybody's a publisher, good book, call me.
So do you think you will write more fiction, or are you just going
Oh,
to write
yes.
whatever comes
I
to
know
you?
I want to write, I really want to write a story with characters and a plot and stuff that happens and people develop. And, I want to write some regular old fiction without real people. Yeah,
You have a lot more leeway, that's for sure. You can make it all up.
I'm excited to try it. I'm like,
Yes.
it's looming a bit large, but I'll try. I'm going to try
Oh,
it.
for you. Oh, Diane says that she loves hearing how New York City used to be. It's so charming. I agree too. And I'm not from New York. I love New York. I love it when I'm able to go visit. And so for those of us who, didn't get to see it the way you did as a child, that's pretty cool. Were there any other things about New York when you
Well,
were a child that come to mind?
Well, I loved it. I loved New York and I loved the street that my grandmother lived on and all the other kids. And, there were the Tracys, the Irish kids and the Jewish kids. And we were all just friends, we didn't know any of that stuff. And, but I also kind of love the picture of the Lower East Side that I learned about when I researched what it was like in 1900, because it was push carts. You would come to America and you could rent a push cart by the day for almost no money and figure out something to sell. And a lot of people got their start in New York, getting off the boat, getting a push cart and finding something that they could sell, and for more than it cost them. And so there were hundreds of push carts in the street. And so if you look on my website, which is maryhelenfein.com, that's my header picture is
Oh,
the
I'm gonna have to see that picture of the
yeah.
push carts.
Yeah.
I remember reading that in your book and wondering if that's how it was, if that's what it looked like to have
Yeah, yeah.
push
They didn't
carts
have
where that's what
cars,
people
so the
had.
streets were open for,
Yeah,
business.
no,
And you
that's
go to
terrific.
the clothing push cart or the food push cart or the this push cart or the furniture, whatever you needed, you'd find the push cart.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I didn't know that. I know that when I go to New York now, you see the bodegas, but the push cart is something different. Maybe
Yes,
it was the bodega before the bodega where the push
you're
carts.
right.
Yeah,
It was the kind
yeah,
of mobile bodega. They did have
right.
Bloomingdale's because I remember I put that in my book. Oh, I saw them on the push cart for $2. That's what Joe Bloomingdale sells them for uptown. So,
That's great.
yeah,
Yeah, that's super.
yeah.
Well, we've had a wonderful conversation. I think it's great that we were able to talk like this and share about your book. And if anybody has any questions, now is the time to put them in the chat because we're just about finished here. We're going to start wrapping things up. Is there anything that you want to add, Mary Helen, about what we've talked about or about your book?
Well, I'm just so honored to be invited and to be a force for the preservation of Ellis Island, which should be a national monument. I mean, how
Yeah.
many people are here because of Ellis Island?
Oh, right,
Yeah,
right. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Right.
Just, I just have enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much for all your nice questions and
Our pleasure. Our
pleasant
pleasure.
conversation. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I have some closing remarks I'm just going to make, and I encourage all of you to stay on board while I wrap things up because there's something I want to tell you that's special. So don't go anywhere. So, on behalf of everyone at Save Ellis Island, thank you, Mary Helen, for participating in the event tonight, and all of you for being here tonight. Join us for our next free author series virtual event on November 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Carol Lamata will be in conversation with Maria Simolis for a discussion on Carol's book, Celestina's Story. You can visit Save Ellis Island's website to find out about other upcoming virtual events and special tours. And I want to tell you, because this is special, this month we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of our hard hat tours. And the hard hat tours are your way of seeing these remarkable historical hospital buildings that are on the island's south side. And the only way to see them up close is on a hard hat tour. We are in the process of trying to save as many of those buildings that we can. It's complex, it's complicated, and it's expensive. But every time we are able to restore a new building because of you supporting events like this and all the other ways you support Save Ellis Island, we're one step further to restoring those buildings to the way they used to be. And it's always great to have a 10th anniversary. So it's the 10th anniversary of the Hard Hat Tours. Next time you go back east and are planning a trip to New Jersey or New York, be sure to come over to the island and take a hard hat tour. You will not be disappointed. I want to remind you too that autographed copies of Stitching a Life can be purchased on the Save Ellis Island website shop, which is just www.saveellisisland.org. Thanks again to She Writes Press for donating these copies. Thank you for being here, Mary Helen. Thank you for writing this book and sharing it with the world. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Bye.